should we redefine television as total video, TV as total video, not television, which is seeing things from far? Is there a need to redefine television?
And that is one very, very important, basic, fundamental point we need to clear. And I touched upon this a little bit in my presentation. Is the point that there is a device and there's a screen and there is content. I think we confuse these two things, and I think the world is ruled by devices in one way, but even more so by content. So I think we should keep that lens in mind. And the TV screen is today bringing in different types of content, and we should look at that unified view of content and then go from there. I think that's where the confusion is.
Your perspective, total video, not television. TV should be defined as total video.
When we look at generations of audiences, actually, we are living in a world where Gen Z has come in, and a little before that, the millennials, and way before that, people like me who is Gen X, actually. For us, television was the screen, actually, and that was the be-all and end-all of it. But when you look at it from the eyes of a Gen Z, okay, there is nothing called television, actually. There's just screen. And for them, wherever they find content which is engaging them, which they believe the fact that that's what they need to consume, they just move on to that particular screen, actually. So television could be a mobile, could be a desktop, could be a tablet, any of those elements, actually. So from that perspective, screen is a device, and content that forms is a video, actually. And therefore, wherever that video is available for them to look for, they are on it.
So you own that it should be called total video. All of you all?
However, there's one point just I want to clarify is that the device that you are using also defines the engagement of the audience with that screen, and also the experience of that audience. And there, I think there's a big difference between the smaller screen and the bigger screen. We need to keep that in mind, because the same content delivered into the smaller screen will have a different impact on the consumer, on the audience, than it will have on the bigger screen.
Yeah,
and that distinction we need to keep in mind.
Prasun, you said that connected TVs are going to grow this year by about 8 million, if I'm correct?
Yes.
So as we move towards more and more replacement of the older TV sets, we can expect the rural areas to be the last to convert to this. But, when you go up and down the NCCS strata, you go up, down in the, go down the towns and the rural, not the towns and smaller towns and then villages, we might see a conversion towards connected TVs totally. So then,
yes,
should we get ready for that now? Should the industry look at total video as a standard rather than that linear television?
We should anyway look at total TV. I think there is no debate about that we should look at total TV, total video for sure. We do need to still keep in mind that the impact on the consumer, which is what we are trying to all have clear, will be very different on the mobile versus on the television screen.
Prasun, the connected TV will give you the same experience as the mobile, excepting that one is
No,
personalized.
it will not.
One is personalized.
It's very different. The personalized impact, the environment they are in, they could be outside, they could be in different places. The distraction is different, the engagement, the quality of viewing is different, and that difference will remain even 5 years down the line when somebody is seeing the mobile screen and when somebody is sitting in the home and watching a television screen, which could be connected or linear, doesn't matter. So that difference will remain, and I think we need to keep that in mind, because the brand impacts of that and the mind impacts of that will be different.
Yeah, but I'm one of the early adopters, so I'm watching whether I'm going onto the TV set or on my laptop or on my handphone, even at home, depending on where I find it convenient, and outside. I watch it on my phone, sometimes at home. I'm sure there'll be people like me across.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm watching, I'm not interacting.
Correct.
With the handset, nor with the TV. Nor with the connected TV, nor with the laptop. So the degree of attention, especially for live sports, is very high.
Yes, but the degree of attention will vary depending on where you are, what mindset you have, etc. I think that is well proven. There's a lot of research and data that shows that the degree of attention and impact on the mind is different in this context. So that is the one thing we will absolutely want to keep in mind. that I'm on the mobile screen. If I'm in the mobile screen in home, in that mindset, it could have the same impact, but not necessarily so, as we know, because a lot of the viewing is not in that environment when you're in the small screen, and that will show up differently on the same content to the same person, same viewer, with a different impact.
How would you differentiate that? Then we'll get onto television. I just
So-
want to know
so- for
how will you measure the attentiveness or the engagementness?
Right. So one thing, for example, typically when they're in the home at the large screen, they're in a much more kind of environment to really get entertained, to receive it. Their engagement, their mindset is very different. When they are on the mobile screen outside, they might be actually looking for something and they're looking for it. So how ads play out, for example, could be very, very different. Both content and ads, the impact of that could be very, very different in these two
So
environments.
measurement. LV, any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there is in generic at a global level and in India that we've experimented with what is called as the attention metric actually. Okay. So there was a study that we did almost for now 3 years. They've been doing it for one of the client, and quite a few advertisers have taken that particular ride actually, where we actually put in that demographic home a device that actually catches the eye movement of the individuals watching television screen. Now, we divided the entire set into active and passive. Active viewers, where viewers were engaged with the TV screen straight when the content was getting played out, the ad was getting played out. And the passive viewers were in front of television set, but not focusing on television. It's actually focusing on the second device in their hand. And what it does is it gives you a score to what level of engagement happening in with the content that's playing out on television. And that's where you see almost around close to 35% drop in attention span on television screen in prime time, even when there are four members of the in the home watching present in the front of television screen actually. So what it does is earlier, 10 years back when we were in the same panel, there was around 4.5 members watching prime time television. Today, that's reduced around 3 members watching prime time television. Afternoon, you have around close to 2.5 members watching television 10 years back. Today, it's around less than 1.5 actually. So what it tells you is a indication of the fact that there are certain content that has come on the second screen which has start taking advantage of, and it's because it's personalized that individual is veering towards the second device and not engaging with the main content which somebody else is enjoying on the.
And you're talking about Indian data, not Western data.
Indian data.
So there's been a drop in number of people engaged from a family on the TV screen. How is it impacting your marketing decisions? How is that impacting? Because do you run a campaign on television as well as simultaneously possibly capture him on the mobile handset, or on an OTT platform or wherever, so that you can complete the journey of buying?
Will I go first? Okay. Am I audible? Thank you. Let me bring very fresh perspective here. Being a marketer for 20 years now, obsession to data has got some limits. While we can go on and on discussing about the measurement metrics, etc., the real challenge when you go into the market and you face the consumer, the story is very different. I will just share one anecdote to you. When I was working with a brand called Bajaj Almond Drops Hair Oil, we have done some consumer research in Kolkata market because we were up against the competition Kyo Kapin. We just asked those consumers about their brand and our brand. Most of the consumers play down that Bajaj Almond Drops is a big company, it's a growing company, and Kyo Kapin is a gone. While the actual facts are very different. How it played on the consumer is because they stopped advertising on a big television while they were still advertising on digital. The consumers has made the perception that this company is gone. It's in a ruckus, and this is the brand which is actually doing good business. Now this is a very small anecdote, but this speaks a lot about the volume that the measurement should not stop at the spreadsheets. That's my only thing. When you go into the market and when you see India as a very different India, while we all are connected on a CTV, but when you go down to the market and you see, those 50 minutes of discussions will tell you about what is happening. And this is where when Prasun was telling me, the the difference between the impact and imagery is proportional to the screen size sometimes, and the engagement might be very different. Because I have done with so many brands, I understood that for FMCG, television becomes very, very critical. The reason is not about just the size, it's also about the experience of it. It is not when somebody is watching it in the night show, but there is a habit of these consumers in tier 2, tier 3 towns to be a form, I mean, informal kitty parties or, discussion points or gossiping, whatever you call it. They discuss what they have seen together as a family last night, be it Anupama or Sasbu, whatever it is. Now, this discussion is a real measurement of your advertisement. And opposed to this, when I see a cricket match or whatever on my CTV or my mobile phones, you see differently. You don't speak that because that's not a collective experience. So this collective experience on a linear TV is something which has actually really worked very well in my experience for various brands. Because I have also done some experiments about having 50 lakhs on digital, 50 lakhs, Facebook, and 50 lakhs on television. All the time, whenever I have done some district studies and consumer research, everybody plays that they have seen that ad on television. I still don't find a consumer who said, "Kya mujhe mere feed mein dikha." Now, with these anecdotes, I have started having the perception that there is no solution right now to TV. But as they all say, the question is not about or. It's not about whether this or that. It's actually about and. If I am into the D2C space and I have a very, very niche audience, then D2C actually, then your digital or CTV actually makes more sense. But for GT and FMCG, where you have a lots of distribution, you have to talk to those people. For creating the brand imagery, the impactful brand imagery, television is the answer for me as of now.
Ankit, you were saying something?
Yeah. So it's also the kind of content that's dictating what kind of screen they consume it on. And of course, there'll be aberrations, right? So if there is a sports event that's ongoing, they might compromise, they might access it on the go, but they will still prefer to come back home and see it on the larger screen and so on. Versus, shorter, snackier content, which they might want to consume on the smaller device. They wouldn't mind consuming it there more, rather than taking the effort to actually load it up on a larger screen. So the point I'm making is that the consumers already made choices. I think content has helped them make those choices. At the broadcaster's end, they've understood that they're not about screens, right? They're about content. They need to figure out which pipe serves them best. And we are seeing that play out in the market. I think as advertisers, we've been a little slow on the uptake, right? Where we've tried to almost segregate this into TV versus mobile versus other screens. The fact of the matter is, even as an advertiser, and of course there is this effectiveness question, but first about reach, right? Are we even looking at reach in the right way? Are we planning for the HML, as we classically called it, right? There are heavy, medium, light users on every medium. Are we actually planning for that today, right? And the environment has enabled it. Today, if you look at it, you can very well skew your TV plan to HML, to heavy and medium, and then go to digital and actually reach out to the light users of TV very, very efficiently, right? But are we doing that well enough today? So fundamentally for me, I think there is a lot of space, a lot of ground that we need to cover. And it will span both efficiency and effectiveness, in parallel. I don't think it's a segregated conversation per se.
Okay, I'll go to Sumeer. You're on the formats, communication formats. How do you see that being changing in terms of communicating to the consumer? And how have you seen it change, and how do you see it changing more? Do you see with total video coming in, you having different formats of communication? We already have some of that. And then you also have the short video platforms, Chingari, and all the other ones which are there in the market.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of formats that have come in. What's important is what is the message and who do you want to reach out to. Also, I think you must keep in mind what is the leave behind. So sometimes we found that discovery works very well on digital medium. People feel they have discovered something. The same ad playing in an ad break feels like run of the mill, but the same ad feels very served to you when it's on your scroll, right? So the medium somehow can also lend itself to the way you consume it, to the impact, to your point, to the impact that the consumer feels out of the communication, and that then determines the formats that you want to create in that and serve consumers with. I just wanted to build another point that we were discussing earlier, which really is about, the context has changed totally. So earlier we used to say the medium is the message. I think again the medium is the message in many ways. Only this time there is more personalization. So there is research which shows that people feel that ads that they encounter digitally are more personalized. Now, this may not be true, and this may be true. I don't know how much of them consumers understand cohorts and targeting, etc. But it feels like that, right? So that also plays a role in the way you devise a campaign.
So
uh, just a point, and that is very true what you said. I totally agree. At the same time, also, the viewers mind is also in a kind of control or less control mode in these different situations and different devices. So I think the consumers are more willing to take what comes to them, usually from the research we've done around the world in India, when they're sitting at home on the television screen. So the advertising which is unwanted might still be okay, but the same situation, that same ad in the mobile where they're attentive and they're trying to search for what they're looking for, can be distracting and can have a negative effect. So that is another play to keep in mind, that plays out in different formats and different genres of advertising and content to go out.
yeah, but so has television as a medium evolved the most to reach out to consumers? You said FMCG, or is there a lot more evolution left to play out? Television, as in classical, linear, big format TV screen, or something which everyone congregates around.
See, if you ask a Gen X or a millennial like me, actually, I'll say television still rules, actually.
Television is still.
Still rules. Okay. Because primarily, what am I looking for? I'm looking for key tentpole properties. And today, tentpole properties are all on television. You take a Big Boss, which is on television. Of course, there is a 24-hour live happening on Woo too. The IPL, start of television, now coming free on OTT, actually. All the Hotstars was still doing it. You have some of the big shows coming to me on television itself. So therefore, the first choice to go to is television. But now what has happened, just look at this actually. Take a reality show, okay, a singing show actually. Okay. The channel promotes that particular show. And what does it promote? It promotes some of the strongest element, the singer who is probably the most promising singer with the best of the song being used in the promotion to bring audiences into the stable. Now the audience is watching it, seeing that 30-second promo and saying, oh, this is a good song actually. Okay, and this guy is playing it beautifully. But when in the sequence of the 1.5 hour program is he going to come? I don't know. So the Gen Z is saying the fact that, listen, I'm not going to wait for 1.5 hours to look at that particular 5-minute song actually. I could go straight onto the OTT, push through the content, come exactly to that song, watch that 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and move out. Okay. So it's basically a segment which has actually got distracted with too many things and have fragmented content to watch actually. So today, the generation that is growing up is having a much more amount of fragmentation than the fragmentation that we went through 30 years back actually. Okay. And if you look at it from that point of view, okay, they are therefore making a good of their ROI from the point of view of time that they have in the hand to look for the best content they want to watch, and they want to watch it quickly in nature. So from that aspect, both the screens, I think as rightly they pointed out actually, for me as an advertiser, if I'm looking at the generation of Gen X, etc., I'll still go with television. But if I'm going to use my branding and my communication to the new generation so that the legacy continues of my brand. I mean, use a mix of both actually to ensure the fact that my brand stays prominent even in the young minds actually.
Yeah. So, you're right in what you're saying that television is what you lose because what Elvi said is Gen Z is on the digital side. They're not on television per se, but the Gen X is on television. So if you want to target youngsters and the Gen Y or Gen X, how do you pull that off? I mean, you said you put 50 on this, 50 on that, yet you found the most efficacious to be television.
Okay, so it's a clear question of media planning because if you have the category which is quite niche, you can identify your audience very critically. Where are they best, their behavior, etc. Definitely, you don't want to splurge your money, over the top. Most of the D2C brands are actually utilizing digital fundamentally very well. So if I'm a Gen Z and I see some protein bar which is good for me, obviously I'm not looking for skip ad. Otherwise, whenever I'm surfing my content on my mobile phones or any other device, the first thing I see in an ad is where is the skip ad button. Now the advertiser has to make sure, it's been said that the first 3 seconds, please make sure that somebody is hooked. Everybody speaks about it, but nobody is doing it. You introduce the brand much later. So if as a marketer, you can, the first call to action for a marketer is that when you are putting money behind your ads, just make sure that somebody is not looking for that skip ad buttons. Now you can make that sure when you do a creative which is really enticing for the consumer. That's first. Second, when you know where you want to hit that ad. So it's very simple. It's very simple. If I have got out of 1 crore outlets, if my product is available in 20 lakhs outlet, then television I need to go. I need to go because it's not just about advertising. It's top of the funnel. It's about creating imagery. And still, call me backward or whatever. The imagery is big screen and the engagement which actually happens to television. Aapka brand ek bar television pe dikh gaya, so you are a big brand. So that's one. But if you are starting and a new age brand and a niche again, so obviously you have to go with the CTVs as well as your digital.
लेकिन आपने तो पंकज त्रिपाठी को यूज
हाँ,
किया
हाँ, हाँ.
मेरे को वो OTT का स्टार है वो फिल्म का स्टार नहीं है
Absolutely. So 2 minutes on this. My markets for Nilons are fundamentally the hinterlands and tier 2 towns in Bihar, UP. So that's HSM market. And while we have seen that people are consuming the huge content, big content like cinemas, because nobody wants to go to cinema or whatever it is. That's a different debate altogether. But people are consuming that kind of content. If you're talking about the content which is being mostly consumed even on your television is the kids content through your Coco Melons and all of those things. But why we have taken Pankaj Tripathi is because the sentiments of the brands and the market and its popularity, and we are pushing toward televisions. So again,
वो OTT स्टार है वो OTT स्टार है वो फिल्म स्टार नहीं है
so that's
or
okay.
masses haven't really
So that-
seen him
yeah,
it's
that-
the
yeah.
urban audiences which have seen him
Okay, so that's the creative decision. That's a creative call. Okay, if somebody can connect to that audience, nothing like it. But the case in a point is that I have utilized similar kind of monies on both, and people have seen my ad on television as compared to the Facebook or whatever ads. So that actually makes the point very clear for my kind of audience. Okay, so I'm talking about CDE, whatever it is. But it works for that way. That is why I'm actually forming my conception about the niche brands or D2C brands fundamentally works wonderfully well. But if you're very highly penetrated brands and if you're playing into consumer, as a marketer, I never look for add to carts. I always look for add to list. The consumer, when he or she is buying it tomorrow, she should put my brand in the list. While D2C, it is always add to carts. So that's how I look at these two different formats.
okay so in terms of yeah Ankit you want to say something
I'm good.
please go ahead
Sorry. No, that's fine. Don't worry. No, fundamentally, again, my take is about, and you asked, the question was around, how do you get these two audiences or two different life stages that they're in, and how do you balance it, right? Is it just about splitting the budget by half. I think, thankfully, while we don't have a universal currency on measurement yet, we do have statistics to fall back on, right? So yeah, so essentially there is this concept of incremental reach, right? So what's your cost per incremental reach, and are you actually building your saturation curve accordingly? I think even today, a lot of brands, while it's a simplistic concept, we at least when I talk to a lot of brands, I realize that it's almost layered planning to say I'll build TV, then I'll layer digital and so on, without looking at these saturation curves as one, right? Saying that what is the reach incrementality that I can get, and how do I maximize that at the most efficient cost? It's essentially planning 101 that we used to talk about, but in a new context. So honestly, for me, that's really what I would want to stress on, at least in the short term, till we get to universal measurement.
Now, like we said, his creative decision, do you buy into it or you don't?
I do. You know, the
Any
interesting-
reasons why?
The interesting thing, if you know, the death of the network television in the West brought about what they call the golden era of television. Now, that's an oxymoron in itself, right? But the fact is, content grew, different kind of content grew. It was possible to do more niche content, which we are also seeing now, right? The fact is, in urban centers, and I'm sure maybe not FMCG, but in urban centers, a lot of people don't subscribe to their Tata Skies and they let it fall, default, right? People have moved on and are not, even things like Republic Day, the whole family doesn't switch it on. Everybody may be seeing snapshots or highlights on digital devices during the day. So the community viewing aspect of television has gone down. There is no denying whether it is through attention because there is a multiplicity of screens, or whether it is through the fact that we are never together watching something, or very few times we are sitting together and watching something. So that has changed. And creative will have to takes that into account in terms of what's the brand, what is their target audience doing, how is it going to be consumed.
Yeah, but LV, you told me when we were talking offline that as you go down the strata, the drop is not that enhanced. There is still a lot of community viewing, there's still a lot of family viewing. So the skew is happening because of the urban areas where individualization is coming in. So how does one factor that into our media investments? I know we are talking about targeted advertising. I know we are talking about programmatic. We're talking about all of that. Television has not really reached that level of sophistication like digital has. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's
because geo-targeting did not work. Geo-targeting, advertising on television.
It's not the fact that geo-targeting on television cannot be worked out, actually. Okay, I'll come to this two parts to this question. One, addressing the top-end market, which was the lower-end market. As rightly Prasun pointed out in his presentation, the fragmentation is much more stronger in the higher NCCS group, actually. And obviously, there is within that, a pay community that happens, which is avoiding advertising completely. So that's a bigger issue to tackle in the longer run. The bottom end is less fragmented, and therefore you have still the mass communication platforms actually work beautifully in nature. And therefore, when you look at it from a television perspective, it is actually garnering the middle and lower NCCS groups, as well as the higher age segment groups, actually. That's where the core of television still exists, and they're spending equally the same time that they used to spend 10 years back, even today in nature. There's no change, major change over there. Okay. The problem comes in is when you looked at it 10 years back, you had around close to 27, 28 channels getting watched on an average on television, actually. Today, if you start looking at the same profile of audiences who are also exposed to the OTT and the digital world, the number of channels across, because content is spread across multiple digital channels, actually, it's over 100 of them, actually. Okay. So therefore, where do I start putting down the ROI on reach, actually? Okay. Am I getting increment reach with every element of spend that I'm actually having? Okay. I may not. Okay. And in that search of optimization, that's where all these new algorithms and pragmatic buying is all happening. Because the definition has been given saying that go and search for those audiences and target him and give him that particular message actually. Okay. In that search, the linearity comes into play to a certain extent. And then after that, the digital world comes into play to build that reach for even further in nature. The difference that's completely happening between television and digital is the way the messaging is happening. Okay. If it's a one single message, I can still get the communication done beautifully. Okay. But given the fact that I may need to do different messaging for different audiences, that's where the digital is helping me to do the personalization of messaging and geo-targeting of the messaging in nature. Television, to fight that particular battle, it's at a universal level is tough. But when you start breaking down television or in other words, a linear video in a market or geography level, then you come up with channels or distribution channels like cable channels. Okay.
Cable and regional.
Exactly. Regional, cable. Regional will take you to one level local, and cable is taking to a second level hyper local in nature. Okay. So when you start building platforms like that, okay, and start monitoring and measuring those platforms, that's when it will start becoming a bigger enemy to digital in nature.
So we've kind of, while regional has been the story for the past 2 to 3 years in hyper locality, I don't think the marketing community has really gone that route too much. They look at still large national audiences. And, the regional television, while it gives you a more focused audience, more targeted, is the per unit cost have really not grown as national. So why is that happening? That television, which is so effective versus for hyper locality and for regional audiences, why has it been not grown as much as it should have? Is it because of a paucity of thought process from brands and agencies?
So, look, I think I can speak for my set of brands, but fundamentally, there are brands which have a national footprint and therefore want to look at a wider basket. And then there are brands which have regional focus, right? And they have SKUs that they want to actually build on or grow, right? Depending on what their priorities are. Now, fundamentally, if your brand has to go after a regional task that it needs to achieve, I don't think there's anyone who's going to debate the fact that it'll make sense for me to go after a regional channel basket and go and do what I have to over there. So I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is about what is the value that the channel is bringing back, right? Now, in a lot of cases, and while I started the point with regional, I think it's more about television in general. What broadcasters confused or get confused with is the fact that we are trying to deliver impact. The question that needs to be asked is, who is the impact for? Is it for the broadcaster and for his channel as a tentpole? Or is it for the brand that's trying to ride on that property and create disproportionate impact for the task that it's trying to achieve? If this dichotomy can get sorted in some form, I think you'll start seeing the value equation change. So that's essentially my retort, because I've heard you say this now, I think about 6-7 times.
Yeah, because I'd like to see, all I see from agencies and brand pushed on prices, not grow the market as a whole.
Yeah. So look, I don't think, Anil, anyone is blindly trying to push down pricing. I think finally it's about finding the right value equation, right, that works for everyone. But again, like I said, that value equation has to work for both parties and not really be looked at as, a growth equation for only one side. It's about finding that right balance. If you're able to, you get to a good
If I may
place.
just add one thing, I think to your point about television, see, what we are oftentimes measuring is, first of all, we don't have unified measurement. Second is, even when we are measuring reach and frequency. We are not always measuring the impact on the brand, impact on the mind, the impact on sales, right? So I need to have the measurement not stop at reach and not stop at frequency measurement, but impact on the total brand, impact on the total sales. When you do that analytics, you actually might find like I showed in my presentation, that the effect of television is much more, which we are not seeing
Yeah, which
today
is what
because
he
we are
said.
only stopping at the reach frequency level.
Yeah, I understand.
So that is a very, very important point to keep in mind, how we balance out mobile and OTT and television out there, which I think is some of it is unlearned at this point of time in this market.
So with the changes that Bark is talking about, will those help in the further use of
Well,
television?
Bark is talking about getting into unified measurement of different screens and devices,
Total
but
video.
Bark is still not talking about measurement that goes into the brand or into the sales. That is where the analytics engines have to come in and say that, okay, frequency I get across screens, reach I get across screens, but what is the impact on persuasion on the consumer's mind to go out and buy that brand? What is the impact on sales actually that is showing up in the book of the marketers? So that piece, if it's still not done consistently in an industry-wide manner, we will not get the full impact of television to come in. To your question of can we raise prices or not, I think that will only come out when the full effect of TV, the full effect of mobile OTT gets actually on the table, which today it is not. Both because of measurement and also the degree of impact that we measure today.
Okay, so we are all convinced that television is continuing to be dominant. We all convinced, but we need to bring about certain more metrics into the picture for it to get better realizations. And we need to have different formats for different screens, and we need to be in small screen, different format, whether it's linear video, whether it's video on demand, or we need to have different interactivity as well. And for him, he goes more by gut and by feedback from the market rather than data.
Yeah, so last point, talking about the hyperlocalization, I mean, the intent is very critical here. As FMCG brand, our intent when it comes to hyperlocalization is just about the numbers and the sales. Thankfully, with the onset of quick commerce, most of the FMCG brands are utilizing and leveraging that. So it's more about the sales. And that's where digital actually fits in very, very well for us.
But you haven't examined cable TV. He'll tell you. Cable TV is a very effective medium. Local cable channels.
No, so see, as an advertiser, I know very well what device is being used for building your imagery or the brand building and what is for your sales. Brand building actually helps me on television, and that's how obviously sales happens, but it happens at much later stage. Talking about hyperlocalization, I as a marketer will never have an intent to create a brand imagery at hyperlocal level. But definitely I need to create business. So that is where when I know that these are the products which are quite niche or can do very well in this kind of the markets, that's where digital comes into picture. And
So
thankfully
you
the
prefer
delivery,
digital over cable.
yeah. No, obviously, yeah. So because I know very well
Is
that
he right in his decision making, preferring digital over cable?
So what
He
he's
prefers
saying is that
digital over
if I want to
cable.
do only in Calcutta, why do I take cable? I can very well do digital.
I think Mr. Krishnan wants
just
to
give
add.
us a minute,
Yes, Mr. Krishnan.
As he rightly pointed out earlier too, brands have the consumers.
No, he's
and
saying
those
he'll go for
different-
digital if he has a targeted audience rather than cable, which is very, very hyper-local, which can drive footfalls
true.
into stores.
Which is true.
Which is true. But we were
because-
discussing something else. You said that
because-
cable is more effective.
No, digital reaching personal is a personalization more than cable, which is still homogeneous in nature to a segment of
So when
audiences.
do you use
actually.
cable channels, local cable? They're not using it much. It's local, which is hyper-local, which is using hyper-local.
Like for example, I have a retail outlet exclusively selling my product in one particular area, and that area is very effectively covered by one cable network, and he is running some amazing in-show programs that is making walk-ins happen into the showroom. Actually, a retailer will take on the cable and say the fact that this is exactly what I want. Actually. Okay. On the other hand, he may have specific kind of messaging on his product to deliver to a certain set of women in that particular marketplace, and that need not be advertised to 100 people. Like for example, there was one of the brand hair oil brand which actually had killed dandruff. Actually, okay. Now that's not essential for everybody to know about it. Actually, right? It's for specific kind of audiences who had the dandruff problem to get on with it. So it could be a personalized message actually that could go out. So it's a combination of which media to choose and what to run as messaging depending upon the brand and its objectives at the end of the day. See, everything doesn't, every boot doesn't fit every feet, right? Actually, so it's the same case over here too. Actually,
Yeah, and that gives you more opportunity to deliver more creatives as a creative agency. Okay. Any last points? I think I've been told to get off stage. But any last points? Have I covered it well enough? Have the points been relevant? Or have I gone all over the place, which I normally do?
No, I think it was a good discussion. Fundamental takeout for me is that obviously we are chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? And we do need to get to universal measurement. We do need to figure out effectiveness a lot more than what we do today. But there is ample scope for brands to start looking at the way you're planning already, right? I think there is enough on the table for us to do. As for the consumer, I think they've already made the transition. It's now for us to quickly catch up.
So, as I said at the start, problem is then we are looking for or A against B. I mean, it's always and which actually coexist, and how we leverage is that's the most important things. And as a brand marketer, thankfully the technology is there. We can tap into both, and that's the way to go.
I think you have to arrive at a solution. There is, as we've seen today, there is no one size fits all or one answer which everybody can blindly follow. And there are so many more choices available. So I think you'll have to arrive at a solution, figuring out what works for you, what works for your brand, what works for your target audience. That's the biggest takeaway, because there is so much more choice now.
Yeah, I think in India there is enough. We know it's obviously there's enough headroom for digital and mobile, but there is enough headroom for television. Once we get to unified measurement, not just of the screens, but also of effects on brand and sales, we will see the white space that's there for television, and television should do well coming from that whole context.
Over the last 2 decades, television has been ruled by content and marketing to a certain extent, actually. But the one to watch out for now is the distribution companies, because they are the one who are pipelining all content from an OTT to a linear channel with the same hybrid box, actually. And that hybrid box is also sending out data back. Now, if he combines the power of his distribution pull, that is connecting with the end consumer, and the data he holds from the data box that's coming, the data that's coming out from the box,
With the reverse part data. Yeah.
he is going to be the next king in this marketplace, actually. And you
There's
always see
one company which has captured a large part of that ecosystem. But thank you very much. I enjoyed learning from you all. I hope you all had some good exchange with me. Thanks.